The sky of Venara burned red as Captain Ray Donovan's dropship spiraled down. Metal screamed, smoke poured through the cabin, and alarms filled his ears. He braced himself, gripping the control handle as the ship crashed through ruined towers and came to rest in a field of ash. For a moment, everything was silent, only the sound of fire crackling and metal cooling. Ray coughed, unstrapped himself, and stepped out into the smoke. He could see the distant flashes of war, blue alien plasma streaking across the horizon. His radio was dead, his helmet cracked, his mission gone. He was the only survivor of his squad, stranded behind enemy lines. He moved carefully through the wreckage, scanning for survivors. That's when he heard it, a faint cry, like a child's voice, soft and broken. Ray followed the sound through the rubble until he saw her, a woman in torn silver robes, holding a small child close to her chest. Her skin shimmered faintly, her eyes glowing violet even in the dim light. She was clearly not human, yet her face was full of fear and pain. Before he could speak, a group of armored alien soldiers appeared from the smoke, shouting in their tongue. The woman stumbled to her knees, shielding the child. The soldiers raised their plasma rifles, and Ray's instincts took over. He fired first, his rifle roaring, energy bolts slamming into alien armor. The fight was fast, brutal, and messy. When it ended, the soldiers were down, and Ray was breathing hard, smoke curling from his weapon. He turned back, and the woman was looking straight at him. Her lips trembled, her eyes wide with disbelief. Then, slowly, she lowered her head to the ground, kneeling before him. Her voice broke as she whispered, "Please, human, take me as your concubine. Just save my daughter." Ray froze. He didn't understand, not at first. Her words carried the weight of shame, desperation, and something far deeper. He lowered his weapon, glancing at the frightened child clinging to her robes. "Why would you say that?" he asked quietly. She raised her head slightly, tears streaking down her face. "Because mercy is forbidden in my world. And yet, I see it in your eyes." Her name was Arila, princess of the Veneran Empire. Her people ruled half the sector, their armies feared across the stars. But now she was hunted by her own kind, branded a traitor, and the small child she held, her daughter, was worth more than an army. Ray didn't know her full story, but he saw the truth in her trembling hands. She wasn't lying. She was broken and terrified, and still trying to protect her child. The wind howled across the battlefield, carrying ash and whispers. Ray's heart pounded. He had strict orders not to interfere. Humans and Veneran nobles were enemies, locked in Cold War for decades. But as he looked at the woman and her child, he couldn't walk away. He tore a piece of cloth from his uniform, handed it to her, and said, "Cover the child's face. They might come back." Arilla stared at him, confused. "You will help us?" she asked, voice trembling. Ray nodded slowly. "I'm not leaving anyone behind, not today." He led them through the ruins, guiding them into the shadows of broken towers. Every few minutes, they could hear distant engines and alien scouts searching. Arila followed quietly, clutching her child close. When they finally stopped to rest, she whispered, "You don't understand what you've done, human. Saving me means death." Ray gave a tired grin, wiping soot from his face. "I've been dying since the war began," he said. "Guess I'll take my chances, for the first time." Arila's eyes softened. She looked at him, not as an enemy, but as something unfamiliar, someone willing to risk everything for people he didn't even know. As the night deepened, Ray sat near the wreckage, staring at the stars through the smoke. He thought of Earth, of the peace he once dreamed of. But peace felt like a fairy tale now. Beside him, a princess hummed softly, to her sleeping daughter. Her voice carried a melody older than any Terran song. It sounded like sorrow and hope woven together. Ray listened in silence, not knowing that this moment, this choice, would change both their worlds forever. Far in the distance, a crimson flare lit the sky. The Empire was searching. And somewhere deep inside, Ray knew the hunt had already begun. He glanced at the sleeping child, then at Arila. Her eyes met his, full of quiet gratitude. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The night on Venara was long and cold. Ash drifted down like dark snow, and the air smelled of burnt metal and sorrow. Captain Ray Donovan sat near a broken wall, rifle in his lap, watching the faint light of the fires beyond the ruins. He had seen war before, but this was different. This wasn't a battle anymore. It was a hunt behind him. The alien Princess Arila sat close to her daughter, wrapping the child in the tattered remains of her robe. The little girl slept quietly, her small chest rising and falling. Arila's violet eyes glowed faintly in the dark, filled with exhaustion and disbelief. A human soldier was protecting her, something her kind would never have done for his. "Why are you helping us?" she whispered softly, her voice barely a breath. Ray looked at her, his face lit by the orange light of the burning horizon. "I don't know," he said. "Maybe because no one else would." Arila lowered her gaze, fingers brushing her daughter's hair. "You'll die for this," she murmured. "The Empire kills anyone who shelters me." Ray gave a tired smirk. "Lady, I'm already a dead man walking," he said, reloading his rifle. "The crash wiped out my signal beacon. No one's coming for me." They sat in silence for a moment, the sound of distant engines echoing through the wasteland. Ray knew the aliens were closing in, scanners sweeping every ridge. He checked his gear. 1 rifle, 2 grenades, a half-charged battery, and a broken communicator. Not much for a rescue mission, but enough for one last fight if it came to that. Arila watched him quietly, her mind torn between fear and guilt. Humans were supposed to be savages, yet this man treated her and her child with care. She finally spoke, her voice trembling. "My name is Arila of House Vane," she said, "once heir to the Vaniran throne. Now hunted like an animal." Ray nodded slightly. "Captain Ray Donovan, Terran Defense Force," he said. They exchanged a quiet glance. 2 enemies, bound by survival. Arila explained that her people had turned on her after she refused to approve the Emperor's weapon, a virus meant to erase human DNA. When she destroyed the research, her name was erased from history. Her own soldiers ordered to kill her. "I thought if I ran far enough, my daughter would live," she whispered. "But there's no safe place anymore." Ray listened in silence, fists tightening. He had seen cruelty before, but this was something else. He looked at the sleeping child and felt something inside him shift. When dawn came, they moved again, following the canyon trail toward the old mining tunnels. Ray led the way, scanning the terrain, his instincts sharp. Every few meters, Arila would glance at him, wondering why a human would risk everything for strangers. When they reached the cave entrance, Ray motioned for her to stay quiet. Inside, it was cold and dark, the walls lined with strange glowing minerals. They made a small camp. Ray checked the scanner on his wrist. The signal flared red. "Enemy drones nearby. They've found us," he muttered. Arila froze, clutching her daughter tighter. Ray grabbed his rifle and moved toward the tunnel mouth. "You stay here," he said. "If they find me, run deeper inside." She shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. "You can't fight them all." "I've fought worse," he said. "Why, human? Why risk your life for me?" Ray paused and looked back. "Because you asked for mercy," he said quietly. "And no one deserves to die begging. Outside, The sound of thrusters filled the air. 3 armored soldiers dropped from the sky. Scanning the ground with blue beams, Ray hid behind a ridge, waiting. The first soldier stepped closer, and Ray pulled the trigger. The shot echoed through the valley. Chaos followed. Plasma bolts, explosions, smoke, and fire. He moved like a shadow, fierce and precise. Every shot hitting its mark. But there were too many. A drone whirred overhead. Locking onto his position, Ray fired one last grenade, blowing the ridge apart, and dove into the dust. The blast threw him back, pain shooting through his shoulder. He struggled to his feet, bleeding. That's when Arila appeared, carrying a strange alien pistol she'd found in the wreck. She fired beside him, the shot burning through an enemy's armor. For a moment, they fought side by side, human and alien, desperate and alive when it was over. The air was thick with smoke. Ray slumped against a rock. Panting, Arila knelt beside him, pressing her hands against his wound. A soft glow came from her palms, strange energy flowing into his skin. Ray winced but felt the pain fade slowly. What was that? He asked. Healing light, she said softly. It costs me strength, but I owe you more than my life. Her daughter stirred, waking up, and crawled into Ray's lap. She looked up with wide violet eyes and whispered in broken Terran, "Papa." Ray blinked, stunned, then gave a weak laugh. "I think she likes me," he said. Arila smiled faintly. "She thinks you're her guardian now." Ray looked at both of them, the princess and her child, and for the first time since the crash, he felt purpose again, but peace didn't last. His wrist scanner beeped. Stronger signals were closing in. Dozens of drones, maybe a whole platoon. They were out of time. Arila's face turned pale as she realized the truth. "They won't stop," she said. "They want the child. She carries something they can't lose." Ray loaded his weapon again. "Then we don't stop either," he said. "Let's make them earn it." As the echoes of war rose once more, the human and the fallen princess stood together in the glow of the burning dawn, both knowing that the next choice they made would decide more than just their lives. It would decide the fate of 2 worlds. The sun of Vaynara rose pale and cold, shining weakly through the ash-filled sky. Ray Donovan tightened the strap on his damaged armor, each movement sending pain through his shoulder. Beside him, Arila carried her sleeping daughter, wrapped in a blanket of scorched silk. They had escaped the first wave, but the enemy was relentless. Drones hovered over the canyon like vultures, scanning every rock and crevice. The Empire wanted the princess dead and her child alive. Ray's mind raced, searching for a way to survive. They couldn't keep running forever. Not with the child slowing them down. He looked toward the mountains, where an abandoned transport station shimmered in the distance. "If we can reach that," he said, "maybe we can call for help." Arila nodded weakly, her face pale from exhaustion. She hadn't eaten in 2 days, and the healing light she used on him had drained her strength. They moved through the canyons, stepping over bones and broken machines. The war had turned this land into a graveyard. Ray carried the child on his back. Whispering softly to keep her calm, Arila followed behind, clutching a small pendant around her neck, a symbol of her royal bloodline. That pendant, Ray realized, was the reason the Empire wanted them so badly. Inside it was a crystal, something that shimmered with an unnatural light. "What's inside that?" he asked. She hesitated, then replied, "It's called the blood key," she said quietly. "It holds the DNA signature of the royal line, my daughter's line." Ray frowned. "So they want to use her?" Arila nodded, eyes filled with regret. "If they get her blood, they can restart the throne and rebuild the weapon I destroyed." Ray's jaw tightened. "Then we'll make sure that never happens," he said. Gripping his rifle, Hours passed, each one heavier than the last. By midday, they reached the entrance of the old transport station. It was buried beneath sand and vines. The doorway half collapsed. Ray pushed through the rubble, clearing a path for Arila and the child. Inside, they found shadows, silence, and the ghosts of machines long forgotten. "This place will hold for a while," Ray said. Setting up a defensive perimeter, Arila knelt beside her daughter, brushing the dust from her small cheeks. She looked at Ray, her expression softening. "You could leave," she said quietly. "You don't owe us anything." Ray shook his head, loading a new power cell into his weapon. "I made a choice the moment I pulled that trigger back there," he said. "I'm not the kind of man who walks away from the innocent." Arila's eyes glimmered with something new. "Trust." She sat beside him, her voice trembling as she spoke. "In my world, mercy is seen as weakness," she said. "But you fight like fire and still show kindness." Ray gave a small smile. "Mercy's not weakness," he said. "It's what makes us human." Before Arila could reply, a metallic screech echoed through the station. Ray spun around, motion sensors blinked red. Drones, several of them, closing fast. He raised his weapon, firing down the corridor as sparks and plasma filled the air. Arila pulled the child behind cover. Whispering prayers in her ancient tongue, Ray's shots hit true, taking down drone after drone, but more kept coming. The floor shook as a larger machine burst through the wall, a walking war droid with glowing red eyes. Ray ducked behind a crate as energy bolts scorched the ground near him. He grabbed a grenade, pulled the pin, and threw it under the machine's legs. The explosion tore through its frame, showering the room with molten shards. The droid collapsed in a cloud of smoke and oil. When the echoes faded, Ray was on one knee, breathing hard, blood dripping from a new cut on his cheek. Arila ran to him, pressing her glowing hands to his wound. "You'll burn yourself out," he said. "And I'll burn," she replied softly. "You've already given more than any human should." For a moment, the chaos faded, replaced by a strange calm. Her light shimmered against his skin, warm and gentle. Ray felt the pain ease, replaced by something he couldn't name, a quiet connection forming between them. The child stirred and reached toward Ray. Touching his hand, her small voice broke the silence. "Papa safe now?" she asked. Ray smiled faintly. "Yeah, kid." For now, Arila's eyes filled with tears as she watched them, realizing that this human, this stranger, was becoming part of her fate. But peace never lasted long. The scanner beeped again. Heavier signals this time. "More of them," Ray muttered. Arila stood, determination replacing her fear. "There's a tunnel beneath this station," she said. "It leads to the river cliffs. We can escape through there." Ray nodded, grabbing his gear as they moved toward the lower passage. He turned one last time to the battlefield behind them, a ruin of fire and steel. He whispered under his breath, "Blood and mercy. Maybe that's all we ever had left." They descended into the tunnels, darkness swallowing them whole. Behind them, the Empire's soldiers stormed the ruins, scanning the walls. They would find nothing but ashes, and the story of one human who refused to give up. The tunnels beneath the transport station stretched endlessly into darkness. Ray Donovan led the way, his flashlight beam slicing through the dust and shadows. Behind him, Arila carried her daughter close, her steps weak but determined. Each sound echoed, a drip of water, a distant rumble, the metallic breath of machines hunting above. They had been walking for hours. The air was cold and heavy, and the silence pressed against their ears. Ray checked the map on his wrist. The faint signal of a human outpost blinked to the east. "Beyond the river cliffs, if we can reach that," he said quietly, "we'll have a chance." Arila nodded, but her face showed worry. "The humans there," she whispered. "Will they accept us?" Ray hesitated before answering. "They'll accept me," he said. "But you? They might not understand." For a moment, she looked down, her arms tightening around her child. "Then I'll stay in the shadows," she said. "As long as my daughter breathes, I'll endure." The tunnel sloped upward, leading them to an old maintenance shaft. Sunlight streamed faintly through cracks above, lighting the dust like golden mist. Ray climbed first, helping Arila up. When they reached the surface, a valley of broken steel and twisted roots stretched before them. In the distance, the river shimmered beneath the crimson sky, the path to freedom. But Ray's wrist scanner pulsed red. He frowned, tapping the screen. "Someone's tracking us," he muttered. Arila froze, eyes wide. "The Empire?" Ray shook his head slowly. "No. It's a Terran signal." Before they could react, a plasma bolt struck the ground beside them. Ray pushed Arila down as more shots rained from the ridge. Human soldiers, 6 of them, emerged from behind the rocks. Armored, armed, and angry, their leader stepped forward. Removing his helmet, Ray's heart sank. "Sergeant Hawley," he breathed. Hale's grin was cold. "Well, I'll be damned," he said. The great Captain Donovan, hiding with the enemy. Ray aimed his rifle. "They're civilians, Hawley," he said sharply. "They're not the enemy." Hale's eyes narrowed. "Civilians?" He scoffed. "That's the Vanyaran princess. I've seen her face in every briefing." He raised his gun. "Orders are clear, Ray. Kill the alien and retrieve the child." Arila held her daughter tight. Trembling, Ray stepped between them and Hal. His voice calm but firm. "You'll have to go through me first." The soldiers hesitated, looking at one another. Hal sneered. "You've gone soft, old friend. Forgot which side you're on." "I remember exactly," Ray said. "I'm on the side that still believes in honor," for a heartbeat. No one moved, and Hal barked a command, and gunfire erupted. Ray fired back, diving behind a boulder as plasma bolts tore the earth around him. Arila ran for cover, shielding her daughter. The sound of battle filled the canyon, metal against rock, shouts and explosions echoing through the valley. Ray fought like a man possessed, his body burning with pain and fury. He took down 2 soldiers, their armor cracking under precise bursts. But Hale was faster. His rifle's pulse shot grazed Ray's side, sending him sprawling. "Still fighting for monsters," Hale shouted. "You never change." Ray gritted his teeth, pulling himself up. "Maybe," he said. "But I'm fighting for the ones who can't fight back." Arila saw Hal aiming again and cried out. Without thinking, she stepped forward, raising her hands. A brilliant wave of violet light burst from her palms. The soldiers stumbled, blinded, their weapons shorting out. Ray seized the moment, charging at Hal. They collided, fists flying, armor clashing. Ray slammed him to the ground, breathing hard. "This war's over," he said through clenched teeth. Hale glared up at him. "You think saving her will bring peace?" He hissed. "She's not peace," Ray said. "She's hope." Then he struck Hale once more, leaving him unconscious. When the battle ended, the canyon was silent again. Smoke rose from the wreckage, the air heavy with the scent of plasma and burnt earth. Ray dropped to his knees, exhausted. Arila ran to him, pressing her glowing hands against his wound. He caught her wrist gently. "Don't," he said. "You've already done enough." She shook her head, tears falling. "If you die, my daughter dies too. She needs you." Her healing light surrounded him once more. Soft and warm, Ray's eyes met hers, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. They had crossed every boundary, human and alien, soldier and princess. Yet in that moment, none of it mattered, only survival. only trust, only the fragile bond they had built. But as the light faded, Arila looked past him and gasped. Hale, bleeding but alive, had reached for his comb. He pressed the signal, whispering with a cruel smile, "Coordinates sent." "The Empire's coming, Ray." Ray turned, horror filling his face. He tried to stop him, but it was too late. Above them, the sky began to glow, crimson streaks of fire descending through the clouds. Dropships, dozens of them, closing fast. Arila grabbed her daughter, eyes wide with fear. "They've found us," she whispered. "They'll kill us all." Ray clenched his fists, scanning the horizon. "Not if I can help it," he said. Standing tall, he loaded his last rifle cell, ready to fight the storm. Arila touched his arm, her voice breaking. "You can't stop them alone." Ray looked back at her and gave a faint, determined smile. "Then we'll stop them together." The first dropship roared overhead, its engines shaking the earth. Ray and Arila took cover behind the rocks, the child clutching both their hands. Fire rained from the sky, the valley erupting in chaos. And through the smoke and thunder, the human and the alien stood side by side, defying fate, defying death. The valley burned beneath a dying sun. The air was filled with the roar of dropships and the scream of plasma fire. Ray Donovan stood at the edge of the rocks, his armor cracked, his weapon nearly empty. Beside him, Princess Arila held her daughter close, the child crying softly as the sky rained fire. Ray looked at the oncoming wave of enemy soldiers, armored, disciplined, endless. He knew they couldn't win, but they could still protect what mattered. He turned to Arila, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Get to the river tunnel," he said. "I'll cover you." Arila shook her head fiercely, her eyes filled with tears. "No, I won't leave you again." Ray gave a faint, tired smile. "You're not leaving me." "You're saving her." Arila hesitated, clutching her child tighter. The little girl looked at Ray with tear-filled violet eyes and whispered, "Papa, come too?" Ray's throat tightened. He knelt down, brushing the child's hair gently. "I'll find you again," he said softly. "I promise." He stood, loading his last magazine, the weight of destiny pressing down on his shoulders. He glanced back at Arila, the alien princess who had once knelt before him in despair. Now she stood tall, her silver robes tattered, but her gaze fierce and unbroken. "Go," he said quietly, "before they see you." Arila touched his hand one last time, her voice trembling. "If I die, promise me she'll live free." "You have my word," he said. "I'll keep her safe, no matter what." And the enemy came. Dozens of soldiers flooding the valley, their weapons blazing. Ray moved like a storm, firing from cover, diving through the smoke. Every shot, every step, every heartbeat was a defiance against fate. The ground shook as explosions ripped through the canyon. He fought not for victory, but for time. Time for them to escape. Arila ran through the rocks, clutching her child, tears streaming down her face. Behind her, Ray's figure blurred in the distance, surrounded by fire and light. She wanted to turn back, to fight beside him, but the child's cry held her still. She reached the river tunnel, the water glowing faintly beneath the cliffs. She placed her daughter in a small escape pod hidden among the ruins. Her hands trembled as she sealed it shut, whispering, "Lyra, my light, live, live for both of us." She pressed her royal pendant into the pod's console, the blood key glowing bright. The pod activated, sinking into the rushing current, disappearing into the mist. Arila turned back and saw fire lighting the sky. Ray was still fighting, wounded but unbroken. For every alien that fell, two more appeared. But he never stepped back. She ran toward him, calling his name, Ray. He turned, blood streaking his face. Get down. He shouted, firing one last burst. The shot tore through an enemy commander. But another beam struck Ray in the chest. He stumbled, falling to one knee. His rifle slipping from his hand, Arilla rushed to him. Catching him before he hit the ground, her hands glowed with healing light. Trembling as she pressed them against his wound. "Stay with me," she pleaded. "Please." "Stay." Ray's hand rose weakly, brushing her cheek. "Guess." "I kept my promise," he whispered, forcing a faint smile. Arilla shook her head, tears falling freely. "You saved us, Ray." "You saved her." He looked at her one last time, his voice soft and broken. "You already saved me." "Princess." His eyes closed, his hand falling still. Arilla's scream echoed through the valley. Carried away by the wind and fire, she held him tightly, her light flickering dim. Around them, the battle began to fade, the Empire's troops withdrawing as reinforcements from the human outpost arrived. By the time they found her, she was kneeling beside Ray's body, her eyes closed, her breathing shallow, her energy spent, her life fading with the setting sun. The human commander approached carefully, lowering his weapon. "What happened here?" he whispered, staring at the fallen soldier and the alien princess. A nearby medic checked her pulse, then looked up with sorrow. "She's gone." The commander noticed something glowing in her hand, a small locket. Inside it was a hologram of a man, a woman, and a child. He closed it gently and saluted the fallen pair. "Heroes," he murmured, "both of them." Years later, the city of Venara rose again, rebuilt under a new banner of peace. At its heart stood a monument of two figures, a human soldier and an alien princess standing side by side. Below the statue, carved in both Terran and Venaran script, were the words, "Mercy is not weakness. It is the fire that changes worlds." On the day of the peace anniversary, a young girl walked to the monument, her violet eyes gleaming beneath the sun. She wore her mother's silver crest and her father's old dog tags. Her name was Lara Donovan, the child of two worlds. She knelt before the statue, her voice calm but filled with pride. "Mother, Father, your promise is kept." Behind her, the human and Venaran flags waved together for the first time in history. And in that moment, the war that had burned across galaxies finally found peace, born not from conquest, but from love, mercy, and sacrifice.